So today we will talk about building modern web application with React and WordPress. First of all, let's try to understand why should we use React for the front end. So it's a decoupled architecture that we are going to talk about, which means we can have WordPress in the backend, and in the front end we can have React or any other front end technology. So the main thing is that the React uses virtual DOM. While this concept might be familiar to a lot of people, still people have confusion as to what actually the virtual DOM is. So how it works is that if you try to manipulate something on the page using native JavaScript, it goes ahead and does the direct DOM query, which is not as performant as React. Why? Because React does not do a direct DOM query. What it does is it creates two copies of the DOM. It checks if something has changed with its copy, and if it is, then it makes changes to the real DOM. So in this fashion, it's faster because it's not doing a direct DOM query. It's always comparing with the copy that it's made, and only it changes that section and that part of the page which is actually supposed to be changed. It doesn't have to re-render the entire page. It's easy to create mobile application because you must have heard about the React Native. So if you have your web application in React, it is easy for you to work on the React Native because it's pretty similar. So you can also have a mobile app. And React is also supported by Facebook. So it's open source and it's reliable. Large community of developers are there to back it up. There's always something new that's coming up. There's a lot of improvements. For example, earlier we had classes, now we have hooks in React. So these benefits are always there. You also have a large NPM library available for React. So just like in WordPress you have like n number of plugins that are available for you to do the job. The moment you have your front end in React, it opens a whole new world of these NPM packages, NPM libraries that you can use. You want a slider, use a slider package. You want any specific functionality like different types of menus, there are so many packages that are available free from NPM. All you have to do is just do NPM install and that package name, and you have that at your service. Okay, now so how do we get the data from WordPress? There are several ways of getting the data. Like you can get the data with the help of GraphQL, but one of the traditional ways, which is been one of the most common and simpler, are the WordPress REST API. So what is this WordPress REST API? So REST is basically a representational state transfer. It is representational state of the data in XML or JSON format, which is available at the server. And what's an API? API is just a way of two systems to interact with each other. So a way of accessing the WordPress data in representational state, which is the XML or JSON format via HTTP request, is basically your REST API. You can perform CRUD operation, which means not only you can get the data from WordPress, but if you want to create a post or perform any post request, create some data, update some data, so you can do create, read, update, delete with the help of the REST API. And you can use WordPress as a headless CMS. Someone would say, why do I want to use WordPress in the backend? Well, the reason for this is because you already know WordPress got so many things. It's got entire very concrete database setup. It has got lots of features already, which if you had to build yourself, it is going to consume time. So that is why it is best to use WordPress in the backend as a decoupled architecture, and in the front end, today you can have your UI in React. Tomorrow if something better comes in, you can always change it because your REST API endpoints are already available, which means those APIs that is going to fetch you the data will always be the same. But in the front end you can have it in React or Vue.js or even Laravel for that matter. So you have lots of options available. You can have mobile application as well and access the data via REST API. So what is this headless CMS or a decoupled architecture? It means that it's a backend only, built from the ground up, and you can use it as a content repository. It makes the content accessible via RESTful API, and it does not have a front end. That's why it's called headless, because it doesn't have a front end. So why should we use WordPress REST API? Well, the first thing is that creating single page application on top of WordPress will be pretty simple. In WordPress, you know that if you have your WordPress front end, then there's always a page refresh, while in SPAs, which are the single page application, there is no page refresh. You can go to different pages by just clicking on it without having to reload the page. In my view, I think it definitely gives a better user experience. While the user is waiting for the page to reload in WordPress, here he already has the content straight away when he clicks on it. Now, WordPress REST API unlocks the data and create a brand new interactive front-end experience. Like I explained, you can have your front-end in anything that you want. You can choose your favorite front-end technology like React, Vue.js, etc. Now, we discuss about the concepts of endpoints and routes. This is also one of the most confusing terms for people. While you may have heard of it, a lot of you might not even have awareness about what exactly it is. So let's take an example. So how do we actually register the route? So first of all, WordPress already has the different REST API endpoints available, which are there by default, but you can also create your own as well. You can register your own routes, because sometimes those endpoints that are available may not give you exactly the data that you're looking for, and at some point you may have to write a custom endpoint. So in this scenario, WordPress has provided you with a function called register REST route, which will allow you to register your custom endpoints. So in this case, you can see it takes the first parameter as your WP-v2 and then the namespace, and the second parameter is basically the route. You can have different methods. In this case, it is post. Then it takes a callback, which is the endpoint handler, and the job of which is to basically fetch the data. So whatever is going to be returned by the endpoint handler, that is the data that is going to be available at your REST route. So this is the callback function that we just explained. It gives us access to the WordPress class, which is WP REST request, and you have the request object available inside the callback. And you can set the initial value of this response to some data, so you can do whatever you want inside of it. Probably if you want to create a post or upload a media or something like that. So whatever you want to do, you can do inside of this callback, and then you can return the response. So whatever you return as a response will be available as a data for that particular endpoint, and you can return it with the WP REST response, and what it automatically converts that into JSON format so that it's available for your JavaScript application to immediately consume. The return value of your callback is automatically converted to JSON, as I explained to you earlier. You can also return a WP error instance in case if you want to handle errors if you haven't been able to get the data. So this error information will be available along to the client along with the status code of 500 by default, but you can change the status code depending on what error you want to show. So let's take a look of this. For example, you're trying to get the username, and if it's empty, we can add an error like the user is not filled. And the username is required. So let's say you have a form which requires you to have username, but user hasn't entered it. This is where you can handle the error and return that you need to enter your username. Okay, and this is how it's going to return the data in JSON format, key value pairs. So this is how your endpoint looks like. Example.com is basically your WordPress site. So wherever your WordPress site is hosted, that's your domain name. This WP JSON that you see over here is basically the base path of the API. And this whole thing, the blue one that you see, is the route. So now this WP v2 that you see, that is actually the namespace, and that's the namespace given by the core, WordPress core. and the ns that you see over here is your custom namespace. So in case if you're creating a custom endpoint, then you will define your own custom namespace so that it doesn't get mixed up with the ones that we already have with default with WordPress. So this WP is basically the vendor name, which is WordPress, and V2 over here is the version number. So there are different versions that you can use for the REST API. Even when creating your endpoints, you can create different versions of it. So the version number goes here. Posts that you see is the resource path of the resource that you're trying to access. In this case it's post, but it could be something else like menus as well, or as well as media, etc. Okay, so the path that the +1 that you see over here, not +1 but just 1, is actually the path variable. Okay, so this is the regular expression, means that any numerical character at least once. So generally we can fetch the post probably with an ID of 1 in this case. Okay, so just to sum it up, endpoints are basically functions available through API that perform CRUD operations, and they perform certain functions like taking some number of parameters and return the data to the client. This is something that we've already discussed. And a route is the name you use to access the endpoint used in the URL. One route can have multiple endpoints associated with it. You can have the same route, but you can have different endpoints like get, post, put, delete. So let me show you an example. So this is the same route. You can see the URL is the same, but this one is get. It gets us the data, and the second one is the post. So same route having multiple endpoints. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an example of how this is going to work. First of all, you might already be aware WordPress has this WordPress REST API handbook where all of the information is available. If you want to list the post, you can just access it like this. You can also pass different arguments, like depending on which page you want. If you want to search any particular post, order by, so all of these parameters can be passed. So taking that example, so my website is codetech.com, and let's say if I want to access the post in JSON format with the help of the WordPress REST API, what I can do is I can just use the URL that it gives me, this route, which is wp-json wp-v2 just next to it, and I can get all of the posts like so. If you're wondering how am I getting this formatted one, I have a extension, Chrome extension format, JSON formatter. That's why I'm able to get it in this format. So you can see that I'm getting all of the posts. Let me just minimize it. I've got 10 items, so by default it's going to get me 10 posts, but I can have more. And then I have the post ID, I've got the date, and then I have got the link, which is the permalink of the post. I've got title, the content, so I've got all of the information that I need. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to show you as to how you can create this application. Before we get into the code, I have already created the React application, the front-end React application. Now just to let you know, this is a proof of concept, so I'm not worried too much about styling it. So if it doesn't look that great, it should be fine, just a POC. So let's say that I have my backend over here in WordPress, and these are all my posts. Now this is my React application, which is fetching all of the posts here on the home page. Okay, I can also click on read more, and then I can have the single post content over here. Let's say this one. Okay, now if you're wondering how to code this, I have got a repository, GitHub repository here. It's called React with WordPress. It has got all of the code that you require if you want to build the application. It has got the demo of it going on. It's got the pagination options over here. You can list all the posts. So all of the information is available here, how you can actually achieve it. But if you're wondering about the code, just to explain to you how it's going, so this is one of the React components for your home page that you were looking at earlier. So I'm using a class home, but you can do it by hooks as well, which is the functional based components. Initially I'm defining the state. I'm setting the loading to false because while the data is being fetched from the WordPress REST API, I want to show a loader. That's why I'm setting the loading to false initially. This post or this array is going to give me all of the data. This is where I'm going to store all of the post, and if there are any errors, I'm going to store that inside of the this particular property. So I'm initializing the state. So in React, those of you who are familiar with React already know that React has a state. So we can manage the state to store the data here and make an update on the data. And then over here, I am just getting the site URL of the WordPress. I have stored that in a file. And over here, I'm using Axios, but you can also use fetch, which is a native JavaScript function to fetch the data. And the reason why I've used Axios because fetch won't be compatible with Internet Explorer. So that's why I've used Axios, so it works cross-platform. Then this is my WordPress site URL. Then again, this is the route that we just spoke about, and I just showed that to you here in WordPress. So this is the route it's going to access, going to get me the data. And if I've got the data, I'm setting the loading to false, which initially I'm setting it to true over here, so that the data is being loading. And then once I've got the data, then I'm just putting the data inside of this post variable. Okay, and if there's an error, I'm just putting that there as well. Alright, and then inside of the component, I'm checking if there's any error. Then I'm going ahead and putting that error on the system. And then I'm checking if the post have got length, which means whether I've not received the post. Then I'm just looping through that post, and I'm just rendering the title, the content, etc. Now if you're wondering what this render HTML is, then let me show you here. Content. So if you notice, this content has got the HTML markup also. So if I just used post.content.rendered, it's going to give me the p tag also. So it's going to give me as it is, as a string. So there are different ways how we can fix it. If I want to render this p tag and not the string as a string, then I can use a function which is available in a package called render HTML, or I can also use dangerously set inner HTML. So both options are available. So that's what pretty much happening over here. So you can actually build your React front-end application and get the data with the WordPress REST API. You also have these blocks available, so you can see that on this page I'm fetching all of the data with the help of pagination. So you've got all of the post, I've got the author name, date, category, etc. I can go to the next post also, and it'll give me all of the next post data. The reason why it's slow right now is because too many things going on my computer, and it's also local. Once it goes online on live, like I already have, it's going to be very fast. So I have a demo here as well. You can publish it on Netlify or anywhere else if you want. So you can see it's super fast. Now it's really fast. It's just a click. There is no page reload. Notice over here nothing is happening. There's no page reload. I click on it and immediately it opens up the next page. Right? So it's super fast. Okay. Now generally, if you are building your React theme, a front-end React theme, you may not require to create post from your front-end. You can do all of that from the backend itself. But just in case if there are any post request or create operations that you want to perform from React, that is also possible. Not that you need it, but in case if you want to do it, it is possible. So let me show that to you. So this is the login functionality I have created. So this is my React application, but I can actually log in with the help of this React application itself into WordPress. So I can just put the password and the username, and I can actually have the entire dashboard in WordPress itself. Sorry, in React itself. So you can see that this is my dashboard. I have a logout button as well. I can create a post from here, so I can add new. So this is using the post request that we have for the WordPress REST API. So I can do new post. This is my content. Submit it. Okay, you can see the new post is created. If I go back to the home page, you can see this is my new post. This is the post we created. Okay, brilliant. Okay, great. Now, how do we actually do that? Of course, we need some authentication before we allow the user to create a post from React application. So we need to have an authorized request, right? So for that, there's something called JWT, which is JSON Web Token. So in WordPress, there is a plugin available. So let me show that to you. So all of the information is here in this repository. Yep, this is the one. So this plugin, JWT Authentication for WordPress REST API, you can go ahead and install and set it up. This will allow you to create an authentication token. So all you have to do is pass the username and the password. So which means that here user can, let me log out first. So when you go to the login page, here you can take the username and password and you send that request, and return, this plugin is going to return the JSON web token, which you can then store. And then for further request for which should be protected, like creating a post or performing any post operation, then you need to send that token along, and that will ensure that it's an authorized request if you want to perform any post operations. There are a few configuration you need to make. All of the information is given over here. You can check this out. You need to define some secrets in your config file, etc. And every time you send a new request, you need to send it in with the authorization with the bearer token over here. Okay, so that is JWT. So let's get into a little bit of detail of what this JWT is, which is JSON Web Token. Okay, so let's say you have a client and you also have a server. Okay, so what you do is, if you want to make a post request, let's say if you want to log in the user, then you need to send the username and password, and like I just explained to you, in form of the object. And then at server, it's going to create a token, okay, which is JSON Web Token, and then it's going to give you the token back in response. What you can then do is you can store this token in whichever way you want to, okay. And then for further requests, when you are probably creating posts like the example I showed you, you can actually send the token in headers with the bearer, and then at server it goes ahead and verifies that token. In case if the validation is successful, then it's going to return your post data. It's going to create the post or whatever action you want to perform, and then return the response back. Okay, if you go to jwt.io, you can check. This is how it looks like. You can see different colors: the red, the violet, and the blue. So the red color is basically the header, which contains different algorithm and token, and the type. The payload contains your username and password, whatever the user has passed in, It also has an expiration time that you can set. Okay, and then it also has a signature that goes along with that, a secret base URL code. So it is pretty complex to crack. Okay, so I think I did show the example to you. I think yep. Alright, so this is the Git repository that we have here. Now if you want to learn more on this, you can go to querytech.com. I've created different courses that we have available. So Babel or CSS, Gatsby, JavaScript, PWA, React, Webpack, whatever you want to learn from these categories, you can just come and learn from here. And you can also build WooCommerce with React, so there's a course for that as well. And you can build headless CMS with the help of React, so you've got this course available here as well. You can also build it with Next.js. The application that I just showed you is actually a single page application. However, you can also have server-side rendering in your React application. You can either do it yourself